Hello, and welcome to the Argyle Financial Controller Leadership Forum, Strategic Insights for Stronger Outcomes. My name is Michael with Argyle. It's great to have everyone joining us today. I have some important information to share with you, and then we'll turn the floor over to our esteemed opening keynote speaker. First, we'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, RAM. Our sponsors are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. We also welcome you to stay socially connected during today's event. For those of you who are active on social media, please use the hashtag ArgyleDigital and follow us on X at Argyle Exec Forum. Also, be sure to subscribe to Argyle on YouTube for exclusive access to all our past events. Finally, and most importantly, we want to hear from you. So during each session, we encourage you to submit your questions and comments in the Q&A box on your screen. Following each presentation, we've set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on your questions. Thank you again for joining us. Now let's get started. Without further delay, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Thomas De Fabrizio, Chief Financial Officer with Impellum Group. We're excited to have Thomas for his opening keynote presentation titled Cash Flow Confidence, Navigating Liquidity and Growth in Volatile Markets. Thomas, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome, and over to you.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Good day, everyone. As intro, I'm Thomas De Fabrizio, a CFO in finance for over 2 decades. I grew up in New York. I got a couple of folks there that put in the chat that they're from New York as well. So, hey there. I lived in Orlando, Florida for most of my life. Now I'm out of Atlanta, Georgia. Very happy to be here virtually with you all today. Today's topic is great, as Michael mentioned. And listen, when a webinar says cash flow confidence, that can go one of 2 ways. All right. It's either really, generally useful, or someone stands up here and tells you politely for 30 minutes, hey, just watch your expenses. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to keep us out of that second category as best I can, because I believe this topic matters more right now than people want to admit. I mean, have you seen the news lately, right? It's crazy out there. And it's been that way for almost a year. But nevertheless, in a volatile market, companies usually don't get in trouble all at once, right? So it happens quietly along the way. Some things happen, such as collections slow a bit, margins thin out, customers take longer to decide if they want to buy, hiring gets a little ahead of demand, inventory creeps up, teams keep spending because last quarter looked okay. Then one day, we've got someone from leadership that says, how did cash get this tight? And the answer, it's usually it didn't happen all at once. We as finance and business leaders, we found out too late. That's what I want to talk to you about today. Not really treasury mechanics, but how finance leaders can create enough visibility and discipline that they stop getting surprised late in the game. Because that's what cash flow confidence really is. It's not about perfect certainty. Nobody has that. We never will. It's knowing what changes early enough that you still have good options. So here's a quick chat prompt here for you in the chat if you want to write down. So let me know. It's either going to be, hey, we saw it early enough, or we felt it first. And I'll give you an example. So if your business has a meaningful cash flow squeeze over the next 90 days, will you and your team see it coming early enough to react, or will you just feel it first? Because there's a big difference. Okay, a lot of companies feel it first. And what I mean by that is payroll starts to tighten. All right, vendors start to call. Someone says, hey, we got to hold off on that hire. So that is a bad place to operate from. By then, you're really not managing cash. You're just really reacting to it. And as we all know, reaction, it gets very expensive. And we don't like that in finance. So the cleanest way I know to say this is more cash flow problems, in my mind, are visibility problems first. Yes, collections, payables, inventory, timing, debt, all real stuff, all very important. But usually the bigger issue in the business is we didn't see the problem forming early enough, and that puts us back on our heels. Finance, we found out after that bend in the road, not before it. And once that happens, the quality of decisions go downhill fast. Now we're rushing. Now we're cutting things we shouldn't cut. Now we're delaying investments that actually matter. Now we're making decisions to preserve that month instead of strengthening the business. That's where finance leaders, you and I, and your teams, we really earn our seat. Not by being the person that says, no, you can't spend that money, and not by showing up with a better looking spreadsheet. It's by helping the business see sooner and act sooner. Let me give you a practical example in 2026, right? And we'll talk more about the first topic, which is the short-term cash confidence. So when people say, hey, we're watching cash closely, that sounds responsible, right? It sounds great. It's what we should be doing. That phrase is doing a lot of work. What does it actually mean? For me, it starts with a 13-week cash flow. It's nothing magical, right? It forces your clarity. You have to see what is coming in, what's really going out, what's fixed, what's movable, what gets ugly if that timing slips. That's where the conversation gets real, and that's what you need with your leadership team. And really, some cash forecasts are too complicated to even be useful. I've seen them. You've seen them. I've even made them. Okay. We got to keep it simple. So if the file is so complex that only one person knows how it works, that's really not a management tool, right? And we've all been at companies like this. We've had that one person that runs the cash flow forecast. If they leave, we are out of luck. All right. But what we actually need is something leadership can really use in the day-to-day. So it's got to be simple enough that when cash timing shifts, everyone can see it. What changed, why it matters, and what it triggers. I'll give you an example. So let's say we've got revenue's flowing in. It looks okay on the surface. Nothing dramatic, no alarm bells. But we're getting a little signals, okay? DSO starts to stretch by eight-ish days. Let's say that. Now we got a few bigger customers. They're slowing approvals. Now we got payroll costs. Those are still rising up. We can't get rid of those right away. Vendor spend, we've got a lot of sticky vendor spend, so we can't get rid of that quickly. So now we're coming down the line throughout the month, throughout the quarter, cash tightens. Even though the P&L doesn't show it yet. It's not ringing alarm bells. That's how it looks when you're starting to go down the path. And I'll tell you a quick story. At a point in my past, okay, we were coming to month end, and we've got loan covenants in the background, okay? We weren't out of compliance yet, but we were close enough that the cash timing mattered. And I think a lot of you will resonate with this. So we did something that no one loves doing. I don't love doing it. We held a batch of vendor payables for a couple of days, okay? So the cash could stay in the account through month end. All right, not proud of it. Could have created vendor calls, operational stress or drama. It didn't, but the lesson was simple, right? If you're managing cash at month end, you're really already late. Okay, you've got to see it. Now, 13-week cash flow view, plus you get a simple vendor payment calendar. That turns that scramble into a choice. So maybe I would have held those vendor payments anyway, and probably I would have. But I would have known it, and I could have told the field, hey, listen, we've got in a week and a half, I'm going to have to hold these two vendors' payments. If they reach out to you, hey, let them know payments are on the way. They'll see them on Monday or something like that. It gives you options. So when you see early, you create options. You create choices. Okay, you can tighten the collection follow-ups. You can escalate disputes faster. You can pause those non-essential outflows. You get discipline on purchasing. And, if needed, particularly if you have a covenant, you can talk to your lender before you need something. Okay, that's the best place to be, is talking to your lender, your bank, when you don't need something. Because once you're in that position where you've failed to meet some requirements, now you're in a weak area of leverage. So if you see it late, everything gets more expensive and more disruptive. Cash confidence really, it's not about, hey, we never have pressure at the cash flow. Because I feel all the time, if you're in finance or you're in business leader, you feel it. It is what it is, particularly if you're pushing the business forward and growing. It's just the same as if you're declining in the business. So it's more around, once we see that pressure, we want to be able to see it early so we have room to act. Now we want to get into forecasting. Okay, this is where finance teams, they either become strategic or we really get stuck in that reporting mode. And a lot of businesses, they're still running on just my annual budget. Do it, set it, and forget it. Monthly variance review, and that's really great. You get to explain, hey, what happened in reality versus what we thought was going to happen in a month. But that's not really enough in this environment. I know you all are seeing it, whether you're in finance, business, operations overall. This environment is volatile. A lot of things going on. What we need is a forecast that helps leadership move. All right, not built to impress people with details. Okay, although the key to my heart is still a great spreadsheet. It's got to be built around the handful of things that actually drive the outcomes. So for you, that might be volume, pricing, mix, labor, capacity, backlog conversion, collections, maybe customer concentration, inventory turns. So it really depends on the business, but the principles are the same. It's not really, the Excel spreadsheet. And at my current role, the cash flow forecast got a lot of tabs, but it's not about that. It's really around what changes the cash and what are we watching and what does it do to the business. So I'll give you an example here. Let's say we have our revenue again. It's holding up, no changes there, flowing in as we expect. But the mix shifts towards lower margin work. Okay, you've got customers leaning harder on the terms, the payment terms. Now, if you only watch that top line, you miss those early signals. But if you're to watch the volume, the mix, the margin dollars, the collection timings together, you catch it earlier. I love accuracy as much as any CFO. But in a market like this we're operating today, particularly the last few years, directionally useful beats precisely late. A forecast isn't there to make you look smart in hindsight. It's there to help the business move sooner. You have to put the decisions in front of leadership so we can make them and move on them. Now, let's get into how I think about working capital. And I think of it as more of a market intelligence. So I think one thing companies get wrong is they treat working capital like it lives just in finance. I don't believe it does. Working capital is often where the market starts telling you the truth. It's telling you what is happening, and that is a signal. So if a customer pays slower, yeah, that is a collection issue, okay? But the customer could also be protecting liquidity for another reason, okay? If inventory builds, yes, it could be operations or we're not moving it fast enough, what's going on? Or it might be demand softening and that no one wants to admit it. If orders get smaller, approvals get slower, if your team's got a discount more, they're not isolated metrics. They are all connected. That's what I want to talk about. It's all connected. The signals all are connected. We have to see them sooner. Resilient finance teams get very good at reading these connections and early. I'll give an example. Okay, we've got customers, they're still buying, but the behavior changes. All right, we've got smaller orders. We've got longer payment expectations. There's more pressure on terms. I got slower sign-offs. Some of these things I'm sure you're seeing right now. I'm seeing it in the market. I'm sure you are. I've got some colleagues that are as well. Now you can say, hey, collections have got some work to do. All right. And that's true. That's true. It's going to be tough, but it's a little bit of an incomplete picture because it may also mean that consumer confidence is weakening. It may mean demand is softening more than the revenue line suggests. That's why finance needs a seat at the commercial table. Not to say no, to say, here what the signal means, and here's how we respond before it spreads. The faster you can get ahead, the faster we can make decisions and move the business in the right direction. And in the right direction, let's talk about growth. All right, one of the other topics today. Strong cash management isn't just about defense. A lot of times in finance, we're let's protect, shut it down, etc. But really, I like offense. So it's really about being ready to move when those other companies get timid. All right, it comes down to capital allocation in my mind. So in uncertain markets like we are today, sometimes teams drift into two bad extremes. And I'll give you them both. All right, one group, they fund everything because they don't want to lose momentum. And we all have that sales leader that says, we got to fund this, we got to fund that, or the marketing leader. Okay. And the other one, maybe this person's in finance. Okay. They freeze everything because uncertainty makes every investment feel irresponsible. I don't think either one is great. All right. So my perspective on it is the better approach is to be explicit about where the cash goes. Get very intentional about your capital allocation. So I think about it in these three buckets. They kind of work in my mind, and if I can bucket it up, I know where I got to slice my dollars. So my first bucket here is like protect. What do I need to protect? So what must stay funded because it protects the core engine of my business? So for me or you, it could be customer delivery, could be collections capability, critical systems, core talent, revenue capacity. So that's my first bucket. When the cash tightens, I want to make sure, what do I need to protect? My second bucket, so I'm still trying to be forward looking here, is improve. Okay. Investments that will make the business more efficient, more visible, and more cash generative. All right. So I think about those things like forecasting tools. Like my company now, we use Workday Adaptive. You got process automation. You want to keep that Zapier going, keep that stuff going. That's going to make everything better. Pricing work. You want to keep that in there. Cleaner reporting. Okay. Margin plus working capital analytics. So those things that improve your business, you want to put that in that second bucket. The third bucket is going to be forward looking again. What is going to be my expansion? Okay. This is my expansion bucket. So these are my growth bets, but they're close enough to the core to be credible. And I mean by that, it's like a pricing change, an adjacent segment. So maybe it's a selective go-to-market move. You know, it's a capability that deepens value within existing customers. So it's obviously a change within your existing business, but it's one of those things that it's close enough where you can get that ROI reasonably, but it's still going to expand your business. So volatile markets really do punish vague capital allocations. Okay. If you're looking at everything in through the lens of we're all strategic, then really nothing becomes strategic. And that's really whether you're in the volatile market or not. You want to be intentional. And I'll give you an example. So if you're addressing your employees about how you're going to be spending your capital in a volatile market, so a weak version would be something like, everyone, we're staying the course on all strategic initiatives and monitoring the environment. All right. Okay, that's pretty generic. A stronger version, what I would like to be said is, everyone, we're protecting the core business engine. We're improving visibility and cash conversion and funding only the growth bets with a clear payback path. That lets everyone know you have clear objective, you know what you're doing, and you're going to go through the volatility as precise and as possible. And remember, CFO here, but I'm telling you, the goal is not to spend less. The goal in finance leadership, business ownership, is to spend more intentionally. Okay, that's why I bucket it in those three buckets to help my mind clear and know that I'm allocating the capital to the right avenues. And so what maybe would help you do that? So let's get into the other part here. The topic would be tools. All right, let's talk about tools, dashboards, etc. So listen, I think dashboards are great. I think automation's great. I think AI is great. And we're all doing that. We'll talk a little bit more about what I like a little bit later, but they're all great until they're not, in the way that it gets confusing. You've got too many things going on because technology in itself doesn't create the discipline that I'd like everyone to have here, which is looking at the cash flow statement regularly, seeing the signals early. It really exposes whether you have the discipline or not. Because if your logic is weak, you know, your definitions, if they're inconsistent or nobody owns the cadence of the meetings, better tools really just, it allows you to see the confusion faster. And it actually kind of speeds up the confusion. Now, it could speed it up in a way of making you make adjustments. But what I feel is if you're evaluating a tool, it's got to really be under the lens of, does the tool help your leadership team make better decisions sooner? Okay, questions would be, can you spot risk earlier? Can you run scenarios faster? Can you connect demand shifts to liquidity decisions quickly enough to matter? If that answer is yes, great. That tool is something you should use. If not, it's not really moving the needle fast enough or at all. I'd reassess the tool. And so this is where tools like ChatGPT and Claude can help, not by doing the accounting. We're not there yet, at least not that I've seen. But if you've got that going, hit me up later. But it's really about speeding up the thinking. So a few examples I've found generally useful is, let's say I want to compare this month's 13-week cash flow to last month's and explain what changed in plain English. Okay, that's around our short-term cash confidence. Okay, it's really great, particularly if you're are an SMB business, you've got a small team. Okay, Also, if you want to identify 5 assumptions that matter the most and what would break if one moves. So I'm looking over my cash flow. Hey, what are my assumptions that matter the most? And what if one of those broke? You could do scenario planning with Claude to Excel, generate a downside case quickly enough. So what if DSO worsens by 7 days or revenue splits by 8%? And then if you're an SMB, even QuickBooks, I don't know what version it is, but they're all relatively inexpensive. They've got that cash flow forecasting now. They put that in place July of last year. That's pretty good. Should be using that in some regard. Also, I've used it in the past. I think it's great if you ask ChatGPT or Claude to draft short collection call scripts or escalation emails that get to the point without burning the relationship. At my last company, we had literal scripts that the collection team would use. They're great, just follow it. Most companies have sales scripts that they just say, hey, follow this, and it'll play out. You get a couple of variations, but ultimately you just want to go into calls knowing what should be said. Finance teams in 2026 and beyond need to see the signals sooner and get the business to act on them fast. So it's not good enough to see it. You got to get the business to act fast, which is why I mentioned I would like finance to have a seat at the commercial table. Let me land this here. All right, cash flow confidence. It really shouldn't be a polished feeling of control. That will never happen. Okay, it's too volatile, as we mentioned. It's more practical than that. So it's really just about seeing that signal early, understanding what's changing, having a forecast that helps you act. Help your business understand what working capital should be considered. I think it should be considered business intelligence. Okay, if someone tells you in the business, hey, it's just an accounting thing, working capital is business intelligence. I want you to allocate capital on purpose, and not because we've always done it that way or we've always invested in these areas. It's a volatile market. Again, we want to bucketize it in those 3 buckets, make sure every dollar spent is intentional. Key is to make decisions while we still have room. All right. So for the folks on the call, I'd like you to ask your leadership team or yourself 3 questions to get the conversation going. So first, if cash tightened in the next 90 days, would you know it early? And what would you only discover till late? Okay, that's going to get the conversation going. Second, are our forecasts helping us anticipate changes in demand and working capital? Or are they only explaining what already happened? That's not a forward-looking forecast. That's not going to help us through these volatile waters. And third, if we had to redeploy capital tomorrow, do we know exactly what we protect, improve, and expand? The companies that handle volatility best aren't the ones with the best logos, or the ones that see sooner, decide sooner, and move sooner. That protects liquidity. That creates confidence. And that's what makes growth possible while conditions are still messy. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions that we have.
Thank you, Thomas. An excellent keynote. Now, we do have a few questions that have come in, and audience members, feel free to continue asking your questions into the chat box. So let's go to our first question. What is the first thing a finance team should do if cash feels tighter, but revenue still looks okay?
All right. Yeah, so if you're seeing cash tighten, the first thing I would do is go straight to the drivers underneath that cash. So not just top line. So if revenue looks okay, all right, you got cash line, that usually means something's happening in collections, in margin quality, in timing, or working capital. So I'd want a clean 13-week cash flow view, maybe a look at DSO movement, maybe any changes in customer payment behavior. I mentioned before, maybe look at some mix, maybe if we're shifting to lower quality revenue mix. The mistake could be waiting for you in the P&L, but usually the cash tells you early enough. So that's what I do if that'd be the first thing I do, Michael. Thank you. Good question.
Thank you. Our next question: how do you balance protecting cash without becoming too defensive and hurting your growth?
Oh, that's a good question. That's right. A lot of companies talked about it before, they swing too far one way or the other. And, sometimes that's good in real volatile markets, but we want to make sure we're intentional. Again, we don't want to cut spending like we're going to hurt the business. We don't want to keep spending like nothing's changed. So personally, I think the better approach is to separate spending into the 3 buckets I spoke to before. Okay. What are you gonna really protect? You got to protect the core engine, revenue generating activities. What do you want to improve efficiencies and visibility? Then look at what's truly discretionary. Okay, every business is different, but one of the first ones, sometimes it's marketing, sometimes it's T&E. I do think those are also revenue generating, so you have to be careful about that. But I don't think the answer is a blanket cut. I think it's a more disciplined approach to capital allocation. Just protect the things that'll keep your business healthy, improve the things that'll make your decisions better, and just be more selective in everything else.
Thank you. All right, our next question. Now, looking ahead to the second quarter of 2026 and beyond, will competitive advantage in volatile markets come less from access to capital and more from real-time visibility into cash dynamics across the enterprise? What's your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the visibility into cash dynamics within the enterprise. So we've got with the uncertainty in the market, the credit market could start to freeze up. I think rates could go down, which could allow money to flow in. But at this point, I think folks, particularly investors, are going to be more sitting on their hands a little bit and not allocating out the capital as freely as maybe it would have otherwise, particularly around the recent volatility over the last week or so. So I would say, or as we go into Q2 here, with that situation going on, I don't think it's going to wrap up in the next quarter. I would say the strategic advantage is going to be that visibility of cash management within your business, because you might have to ride through the Q2 and Q3 without the liquidity of the markets potentially.
Excellent. Thank you. Our next question. Now, how do you balance maintaining strong reserves, cash reserves, with investing in growth initiatives with economic signals remaining a bit mixed? I feel like you touched a little bit on this, if you want to expand a little more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll keep my answer specific to maybe the small, mid-sized businesses. That's really where the cash on hand is important. So my always thing I tell small business owners is to keep at least 3 months of operating expenses on your books, in your balance sheet. Okay, cash account, but make it those high yield cash accounts, so you're earning maybe about 3.5% now, maybe 3.75, depending if you get the high yield savings. So if you get 3 months of operating expenses on the balance sheet, you're holding that in a cash account, then you can be a little bit more strategic. So my first thing is hold the 3 months. That allows you to get through the volatile market in case you hit a road bump, because you're not going to be able to see everything. And then you start investing in really, I'd probably push it into some of those buckets that I talked about earlier, which is what's going to really give the business more visibility. So that's those tools I talked about. If you want to go to FP&A tools, there's Anaplan, there's Adaptive. Those things I think are great. Or if you want to, if your company is doing marketing, maybe you use HubSpot a little bit more. You go to a CRM. So you invest in those things that'll make your business more efficient. And then that expand, which is try out new things in the business. You always want to set some dollars aside to trying out new things. I mentioned keep it kind of strategic in volatile markets. So like a pricing change, going to adjacent market. My last company, we added bolt-on services. So it's really about, in that regard, you really want to grow your share of your customer's wallet. And so a lot of times your competitors are doing that. So you kind of know what's working, and you go into an adjacent market. So I'd look at it as protect your business. So have at least 3 months of operating cash on hand, then go into making your business a little more efficient. And then the third bucket is going after those expansion bets that'll pay off 2-3 years in the future. But it's all about generating cash and keeping your eye on the ball.
Thank you. We've got time for one final question and closing thoughts. So do you see the role of the controller evolving from a steward of historical reporting to maybe strategic architect of liquidity strategy?
I think there's only one answer to that. That's yes, absolutely. What we've seen over the last 5 years or so is that the avenue through to the CFO role is becoming a lot more strategic, and even more FP&A folks are running into that role versus in the past was a lot of controllers rolling into that role. So I believe that the controllership particularly has ownership over the cash flow. And that is one of the things that can propel them into the CFO seat, because that dovetails right in FP&A. Maybe you have both right now, but particularly that is the avenue where you can add the most value, particularly in volatile markets, debt covenances. If you want to invest for growth, all those things are really business imperative. You get a full line of sight into the C-level suite if you've got that insight. So 100%, I think that's where the controllership that's where we should be going with that team, is moving more to forward looking. Cash is one of those things that is front and center right now.
Thank you so much, Thomas. That's all the time we have. This is an excellent keynote. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and for this session. Now, this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Our next session will begin at 11:35 a.m. Eastern Time, which will be a panel discussion titled "The Digital Finance Controller, Reducing Risk and Building Agility." Please remain on the stage, and the next session will begin automatically. We look forward to seeing you there. Thomas, thank you so much.
Thank you.